Ranting American back. I want to talk to you about perception for just a minute.
My attack on stupid continues with this fellow here. I have no idea who the ranting American is. I saw his video online and I decided I have to go after it because there's no end of stupid in this video. So let's let him get started with his take on perception.
You see that flag right there? Stop telling me what that flag represents. Stop telling me what that flag means. Consider this. What that flag means to you, it may not mean to someone else. What does a cross mean to you? Are you religious? Maybe it means something. Are you an atheist? Maybe it means nothing. But don't tell people what their belongings mean to them. If your perception of this flag is nothing but evil and hateful and nasty and vicious, maybe it's not the flag. After all, the flag, come on, man, that's just fabric with a pattern on it. What did it ever do to anybody? What did it do to you? Why does it bring out so much anger and hatred from you? The flag doesn't hate anybody. That pattern has never done anything to anyone. That pattern is just a pattern on fabric.
Who gives a fuck? I mean, the swastika never actually hurt anybody, so would you be okay with the local governor pulling down the American flag and putting up a Nazi one? Or the ISIS flag, it never actually killed anybody. Are you fine with the local high school flying it instead of your state flag? The idea that just because the flag itself never actually killed anybody, the colors or the patterns never actually hurt anyone is fucking irrelevant. Symbols are more a product of their time, history, the people who waved them, who looked at them, created them, what they meant, what they stood for, when they waved them, when they showed them off. And there's no denying that the Confederate flag that you're showing here has some unclean history behind it. It is a flag of fucking traitors. Traitors who committed treason in the interest of slavery. More to the point, though, you don't seem to understand the basic fundamental ideas behind symbols. Symbolism and symbols are designed oftentimes for the sole unique purpose of instilling and creating emotional reactions. Some symbols are meant to create feelings of happiness. Others create symbols of anger, frustration. Some make you sad. Others make you happy. There's the whole fucking gamut of things and ideas that can be portrayed by symbols. And controversial symbols will often engender different reactions in different people. And make no mistake about it, the Confederate flag is a flag of traitors. It's a flag that's full of controversial history. I don't care what you say, that this is an undeniable fact, to be honest. So the idea that different people would have different reactions to this controversial symbol should be a given to you. You should understand this. You do not seem capable of the idea that different people will have different feelings to the same thing.
But what it means to me, I'll tell you what that flag means to me. That flag means that I have the right to decide how I want to live. That flag means the people of each state have the right to determine what the laws are going to be in their state. They have the right to decide how they want to live.
Oh, wait, you're serious? Let me laugh even harder.
Unless you're black, of course. Unless, of course, you're a slave. Now, I have watched this video before. I think my audience at this point knows where you're going with this. So let's just cut the bullshit, let you continue on, get to the crux of your argument, what you're going to say next, because this is where the bulk of my video is going to really kick off.
Now, you may say, oh, that flag is all about slavery. You know what? The Civil War wasn't about slavery.
Now, I need to apologize to my small audience at this moment because this video is about to get very detailed, very dry, and very historical data based. I'm about to read a few passages from selected Confederate letters of secession. Different states, when they seceded, they sent the federal government a letter with their list of complaints explaining why it was that they were trying to leave the nation. I figure at this point there's no better way to explain why they decided to do that than to use their own words. So let's get started with South Carolina, shall we? The ends for which the Constitution was framed are declared by itself to be to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. These ends it endeavored to accomplish by a federal government in which each state was recognized as an equal and had separate control over its own institutions. The right of property in slaves was recognized by giving free persons distinct political rights, by giving them the rights to represent and burthening them with direct taxes for 3/5 of their slaves, by authorizing the importation of slaves for 20 years, and by stipulating for the rendition of slave fugitives from labor. We affirm that these ends for which this government was instituted have been defeated, and the government itself has been made destructive of them by the action of the non-slaveholding states. Those states have assumed the right of deciding upon the propriety of our domestic institutions, and have denied the rights of property established in 15 of the states and recognized by the Constitution. They have denounced as sinful the institution of slavery. They have permitted open establishment among them of societies, whose avowed object is to disturb the peace and to elloign the property of the citizens of the other states. They have encouraged and assisted thousands of our slaves to leave their homes, and those who remain have been incited by emissaries, books, and pictures to servile insurrection. For 25 years, this agitation has been steadily increasing until it has now secured to its aid the power of the common government. Observing the forms of the Constitution, a sectional party has found within the article establishing the executive department the means of subverting the Constitution itself. A geographical line has been drawn across the Union, and all the states north of that line have united in the election of a man to the high office of President of the United States whose opinions and purposes are hostile to slavery. He is to be entrusted with the administration of the common government because he has declared that the government cannot endure permanently half slave, half free, and that the public mind must rest in the belief that slavery is in the course of ultimate extinction. Now, South Carolina is a bit of an auspicious state because it was the first one to declare independence from the Union. It was the trendsetter. It was the one who started the whole mess. And in there, what I just read to you is basically the entire second half of their letter of secession. And it's one long bitch session about northern states not respecting the rights of slave ownership. They're complaining about northern states who don't respect the Fugitive Slave Act. They're bitching about the Underground Railroad, shit like that. That's basically everything in that they're talking about. And then the first half of the document is nothing more but then putting slavery in a historical context as it relates to the United States, the agreement of the Constitution, independence from England, all of that. Basically, all they do is, in this entire document, is they establish that slavery is a foundational principle of America, and then complain that the northern states have not been honoring it. This is the entirety of South Carolina's complaints as it relates to their decision to secede. And they're nowhere near the only one. Let's move on to Mississippi's letter of secession because that gets even better. Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world. Its labor supplies the product which constitutes by far the largest and most important portions of commerce on the earth. These products are peculiar to the climate verging on the tropical regions, and by an imperious law of nature, none but the black race can bear exposure to the tropical sun. These products have become necessities of the world, and a blow at slavery is a blow at commerce and civilization. That blow has long been aimed at the institution, and was at the point of reaching its consummation. There was no choice left us but submission to the mandates of abolition, or a dissolution of the Union whose principles had been subverted to work out our ruin. So, any of you catch that shit? Especially where I kind of spoke a little louder and emphasized some of it. The people of Mississippi, the politicians of the state, were coming outright and saying that all of civilization and commerce basically depends on keeping the nigger slaves going in Mississippi. This is what they were saying. This is what they actually believed. Do you honestly expect me to believe that you don't think they'd be willing to fight a civil war over something that they believe actually to be an important, all essential element to civilization as they knew it at the time? You'd be fucking stupid not to believe him for saying this. I mean, the entire rest of the letter is nothing but a laundry list of bullshit that they think were attacks on the institution of slavery, like not respecting the Fugitive Slave Act, as South Carolina's bitched about. They fear that northern states might be working towards treating Negro and white people as equals. Oh my God, no. And then they go on to talk about not allowing, new slave states to be admitted to the Union. This is in the entirety of the list. All Mississippi Declaration of Secession is identifying themselves as being pro-slavery and bitching about things that the North have done attacking slavery. It's nothing but a long history list of the abolitionist movement. That's the entire fucking document. And as bad as they are, this is pretty bad, in my opinion. When you want stupid, you go to Texas. So let's take a trip down there, shall we? We hold as undeniable truths that the governments of the various states and of the Confederacy itself were established exclusively by the white race for themselves and their posterity. That the African race had no agency in their establishment, that they were rightfully held and regarded as an inferior and dependent race, and in that condition only could their existence in this country be rendered beneficial or tolerable. That in this free government all white men are, and of right, ought to be entitled to equal civil and political rights. That the servitude of the African race, as existing in these states, is mutually beneficial to both bond and free, and is abundantly authorized and justified by the experience of mankind and the revealed will of the Almighty Creator, as recognized by all Christian nations. While the destruction of the existing relations between the two races, as advocated by our sectional enemies, would bring inevitable calamities upon both and desolation upon the 15 slaveholding states. Have you noticed a certain tone and tenor going through these documents? Have you noticed a certain theme that keeps on popping up? It's slavery. Slavery, 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 slavery. This is it. This is what they're going for. South Carolina started out, their entire letter of secession was a historical context of slavery as it relates to the Constitution and the founding of America, and then talking about perceived slights against the institution. Mississippi goes a step further and actually proclaims that slavery is like a foundational idea of the entire civilization of the fucking planet and the world economy. Black people in Mississippi working as fucking slaves in the fields. That's what the entire world fucking economy is dependent upon, if you look at what they're writing here. In Texas, fucking heaven for stupid. Oh my God. Thank you, Texas. You're great to make fun of. I'm glad you exist. They take it a step further and proclaim that fucking slavery is good for the fucking slaves. Well, them niggers is good as slaves, and it's good for them too. I mean that this is the level. This is the fucking mentality that we're dealing with. And the reason this pisses me off so much is because in this era of history, there are few things more well documented than the fact that the Confederacy broke off from the United States over the institution of slavery. The only thing that could have made it any brighter is the invention of neon lighting. The only way it could have been any louder is if someone had invented the bullhorn. This is it. That this could have been. It's hard to figure a way for them to have proclaimed it any more strongly. In fact, but let's fucking say fuck the states. Let's go to the Vice President of the Confederacy himself and let's see what he has to say. The new Constitution has put at rest forever all the agitating questions relating to our peculiar institutions, African slavery as it exists among us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization. This was the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution. Jefferson, in his forecast, had anticipated this as the rock upon which the old Union would split. He was right. What was conjecture with him is now a realized fact, but whether he fully comprehended the great truth upon which that rock stood and stands may be doubted. The prevailing ideas entertained by him and most of the leading statesmen at the time of the formation of the old Constitution were that the enslavement of the African race was in violation of the laws of nature, that it was wrong in principle, socially, morally, and politically. It was an evil they knew not how well to deal with, but the general opinion of the men of that day was that somehow or other, in the order of providence, the institution would be evanescent and pass away. Those ideas, however, were fundamentally wrong. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of the races. This was an error. It was a sandy foundation, and the idea of a government built upon it. When the storm came and the wind blew, it fell. Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideas. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. This truth has been slow in the process of its development, like all other truths in the various departments of science. The tone, the tenor, the theme continues. Here we got the fucking vice president of the Confederacy coming out again and saying, the entire principle and founding principle of the Confederacy is the idea that black people are inferior to white people and should be their fucking slaves. There is no ambiguity here. There is no room for fucking misinterpretation. They are being clear, concise, and as outright with this as they can possibly fucking be. The idea that you could actually deny this and act like the Confederacy and the Civil War was not based upon slavery is denying some of the most basic and fundamental facts of history. And I can hear some people probably saying, well, this is just the politicians. This is just, the government. This is not the people. I feel like pointing out that the government of the United States is not the only major institution of the world that split over the institution of slavery. You may have not remembered from the Texas letter that I read, they mentioned the Almighty Creator. Have you ever heard the term or someone refer to themselves as a Southern Baptist? Have you ever stopped to wonder why Southern Baptism is a thing? Have you ever stopped to wonder why Southern Baptist Church is a concept? That's because the Baptist Church also split around the same time over the institution of slavery. From the Deuteronomic Code to the Holiness Code of Leviticus, slavery in the Bible, even going up to Jesus, is completely fucking fine. In fact, one of the tricks that Christian slave owners would use to keep their slaves subservient and docile is to convert them to Christianity and then hammer into their heads passages supporting slavery. The stuff where Jesus tells slaves to obey their master, where they say it's okay to beat a fucking slave as long as he doesn't die within a couple days. All the various different parts of the Bible in support of slavery would get slammed into their fucking head over and over again until the fucking slaves decided that this is what they were put on the earth for. This was at least part of the strategy that slave owners employed. A lot of them read the Bible themselves, as Mississippi, the fucking letter secession pointed out, black people with their darker skin are better at handling the hotter climates. They basically presume that God put black people on this planet to work in the fields for the people of Mississippi. They were put on this planet to be slaves. They believed that this was part of God's divine fucking plan. The people of the American South, this is the shit that they believed. They believed that slavery was a God-inspired, divine, and planned concept with black people as being the slaves to work the fields in these hotter weather of the South. This is the fucking idea behind them. So the idea that anyone can make this fucking stupid, asinine, ridiculous claim that the Civil War was not about slavery is fucking stupid. Now, one of the common arguments used against the idea that the Civil War was about slavery is that they try and proclaim that not a lot of people in the South actually had slaves. It was like 3% of the population or some fucking bullshit number that gets thrown around, which is kind of a misleading statistic because you got to remember, this was the 1860s. The only one who actually owned anything at all were the head of household, the man of the house. He was the only one who really had any property rights whatsoever. So he was the only person who would actually have owned slaves. I think a more honest, detailed, and informational thing to look at would be the percentage of households who owned slaves, especially considering the fact that households back then tended to be bigger. So that's going to inherently make the percentage of people owning slaves appear smaller. If you take a look at this census data from 1860, you can take a look and see the percentage of families who had slaves. Alabama, 35%, Arkansas, 20%, Florida, 34%, Georgia, 37%. A lot of states, over a quarter of the families own slaves to one extent or another. And if you take a close look at Mississippi and South Carolina, it's almost half in both of those fucking states. At the end, the last column here, slaves as percentage of population. This is the percentage of total people in the state were slaves. And again, 44% in Florida, 44% in Georgia. Take again another look at Mississippi and South Carolina. Over half the people living in those states were fucking slaves. The idea that it was some small, minuscule thing that almost nobody had any slaves is fucking ridiculous. It's incorrect, it's inaccurate, and it's only pushed by people who either don't understand what's going on or don't care or want to be dishonest. I hear so often, it's just politically correct to say the Civil War was about slavery. No, motherfucker, that's not true. The politically correct people here are you. The people who claim that the Civil War wasn't about slavery, they're the ones being politically correct. They're trying to spare their own feelings. The sons of Confederate veterans, they're the fucking precious little snowflakes who don't want to get their fucking fee-fees hurt. They don't want to admit that their ancestors, who were supposed to be freedom-loving patriots, committed treason in defense of slavery. Those two things don't add up. They fucking know it, so they have to rewrite history to try and pretend that their fucking ancestors weren't a bunch of goddamn treasonous motherfuckers who wanted to keep the nigger down. Alright, real quick before I get back to the actual substance of this guy's video, I would like to address 3 quick claims that I see from various different people over the years that, as arguments that the Civil War wasn't about slavery. Number 1 was Lincoln being willing to back off abolition. If he was willing to do that, how could he have been so dedicated to ending slavery? And the answer, of course, is that he was the President of the United States, not the President of abolition. His job was not to end slavery, it was to protect and defend the United States. He was willing to sacrifice his own ideology, put it on the back burner, as a means of preserving and protecting the fucking country. I know this is going to come as a surprise to a lot of modern American conservatives, but there have been a time when presidents were actually willing to sacrifice their own beliefs in the name of making the country stronger. I know it's weird, it's going to seem strange, but it has happened. Number 2, if Lincoln was willing to back off the abolitionist movement as he was, why would the South still secede? And the answer, of course, is they had no way of knowing that Lincoln would keep his fucking word. On top of that, they had no way of knowing that the next president wouldn't be an abolitionist and wouldn't demand the end of slavery. So basically, it was the case of let's just rip the Band-Aid off now really fast and get it over with kind of a situation as far as they were concerned. And number 3, I've heard various different claims. Lincoln did this, Lincoln did that, various different overpowered stuff. I've even heard motherfuckers claim that the Emancipation Proclamation as part of the reason why they had to secede, which actually this fucktard here is actually going to explain it here in a moment why that's impossible. But more than anything that makes this obviously untrue is the fact that South Carolina was the first state to secede, and they actually did it several months before Lincoln actually took office. Like 2 months before he actually became president, they seceded. He hadn't done anything yet except get elected president. This is one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever heard. It's literally impossible as long as we're still living in a linear time situation. So, yeah, that's fucking stupid. Alright, dipshit, show's on you.
The Civil War didn't become about slavery until 3 years into it. It took 3 years before Lincoln said, I need to do something to undermine the South and to gain some kind of moral support and be on the right side of history in the North. So I'm going to do the Emancipation Proclamation and free the slaves. You know what? Lincoln didn't give a damn about slaves. Seriously. This flag was never about slavery.
I don't think I need to dig too deeply into this because I feel like I've already pretty firmly established that the southern states were convinced that the idea was slavery. I think I've pretty well established that the entire secession movement was based upon the idea of abolitionists getting too much fucking power in the US government. I think that's fairly well established at this point. What I find amusing, though, is he then goes on to establish that he has no idea what the fucking Emancipation Proclamation actually is. So many people like to say, well, this is where Lincoln freed the slaves. No, this is where Lincoln freed some of the slaves. To anyone actually who knows what the fucking thing did, it actually just freed the slaves in states that were in a state of rebellion. So yes, to that extent, it was about undermining the Confederacy. It was about trying to get some of the slaves who were not quite ready to stand up and fight against the South to actually like try and undermine the shit a little bit more so that way they could get some fucking freedom and independence. That was the entirety of the fucking Emancipation Proclamation. As far as the world and the country and everyone involved at the time was concerned, it was already well established that it was about slavery, and Lincoln fucking doing the Emancipation Proclamation to make it about slavery is just showing you don't know the first fucking thing what you're actually talking about, jackass.
Those 13 stars, you say, oh, that represented the 13 stars, the 13 states of the Confederacy. First of all, do your homework, Google it, look it up, it's free information. There were only ever 11 states in the Confederacy. The Confederate States of America consisted of 11 states. Tennessee was the 11th and final state to secede from the Union. That's it. That's the historical facts. Those 13 stars represent the 13 original colonies that rebelled against England.
And those 13 colonies went on to found a nation, in part founded upon the institution of slavery. And if you actually go through the various different letters of secession, all the various different documents, you see over and over again the idea reiterated that as far as they were concerned, one of the foundational principles, one of the basic ideas behind America at its inception and its creation is that slavery is legal. States are allowed to determine for themselves whether or not slavery should be allowed. The fact that they take the fact that the North doesn't really follow that principle, that doesn't agree with them, that they don't return escaped slaves, as being a direct and violation of the Constitution. This is why it's 13 stars. This is why they're trying to represent the original 13 colonies, is because they think that the North's objection to slavery, they're fighting against it, they're working against it, their abolitionist desires is a violation of the Constitution, and the South are proclaiming that their love and support for slavery makes them more pure, more directly connected to the Founding Fathers.
But those stars to me represent me in my personal rebellion against the government that oppresses me in my life. They dictate my firearms rights. They dictate my personal possessions rights. They dictate how much of my paycheck that I work for I actually get to keep. That's what that flag means to me.
What's that saying that you conservatives always like to use? Freedom don't come free? Well, guess what, motherfucker? Sometimes you can't just spend the lives of poor people in the Middle East to actually pay for the price of freedom. Sometimes you actually have to send in actual money. Truth be told, as far as I'm concerned, all rights, all freedoms, all liberties and shit is just the product of government allowing you to have them. So the idea that they decide which firearms you can have, which speech limits you have, blah, 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 blah. It's the product of any government. It's the product of any society. So getting pissy over that is just the most irrelevant, stupid, fucking ignorant thing ever. Have fun with it.
If you see that flag and it brings nothing but hatred out of you, maybe you should consider the hatred that's inside you. If that flag and the sight of someone with it makes you just filled with hate and rage, maybe you need to reconsider what's inside you. What's in you that makes you hate someone instantly just at the sight of that fabric?
Well, as for me, I hate things that are incorrect. I hate things that are ignorant, stupid, and fucking moronic. You have that in spades. That flag and people who tend to wave it around are very, very high tendency to also possess these attributes. So I guess when you ask me what fills me with hate when I see that flag so much, it's pretty much that. But you're wrapping up. There's not really anything relevant left in the rest of your fucking video. Actually, there wasn't anything relevant in there to begin with, so I think I've wasted enough time on you. I've wasted way too much of my life that'll never get back. Hopefully some other people will actually waste some time watching this video and encourage others to also waste time watching the video by liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing, all that fucking bullshit to help me out. I'd appreciate it greatly. Uh, I'll shout out to the Ranting American. He's got a pretty fairly significant following on Facebook, like 10,000 or something. So apparently he actually has some minuscule amount of influence. Feel free to ignore him, please. Don't give him any attention. He doesn't deserve it. Let him learn something and then actually pay attention to him. Aside from that, though, I'm going to end it here. Have a nice day.